All right, I'm going to call to order the Thursday, May 14th, 2026 meeting of the City of Concord Finance Committee. We don't have a lot of people here in the audience who aren't staff, but I will just mention again that, as I usually do, that there are listening devices in the rear of the room in case someone has difficulty hearing what we're saying. They could be obtained by, I guess it's Michael today. Yep, there he is, back there in the Concord TV booth. I also, in the interest of stalling for some city councilors, I also want to give a shout out to my Aunt Betty Cagini, Betty Champlin Cagini, who turned 96 today. I did call her at noon like a dutiful nephew to wish her a happy birthday, but she was out having lunch with friends, following which this evening she's going to a Girl Scout function. So much for that anyway. She's active. She's a very active 96-year-old woman. In any case, I know that parking is difficult. I know some councils who've just come in have said that they had to orbit around, and I've had a text from one councilor who is doing that as well. However, I will take the roll call. Councilor Brown?
Here.
I am here. Councilor Davey?
Present.
Councilor Fennessy?
Present.
Councilor Foote?
Present.
Councilor Horn?
Here.
Councilor Caleb is not here. I will hold off. Councilor Keach? I will hold off. Councilor Kretovic?
Here.
Councilor Kurtz is looking for parking. Councilor Schlosser?
Here.
Councilor Schultz is on her way. Councilor Todd?
Here.
I'm sorry. Councilor Seku and Councilor Grady Sexton are excused tonight. We will see if other people arrive. Hopefully they will. Again, it's a rainy night. There seems to be something going on locally. It's hard to find parking. However, for the folks at home, I will just explain that while we are, in fact, the City Council, tonight we are meeting as a committee of the whole, which is a term that's used when an entire body meets separately as a separate committee. And tonight we are meeting as the Finance Committee. We will continue meeting as the Finance Committee through a series of presentations by the city manager and by his staff, after which we will welcome public comment each night. But we will continue to deliberate as the Finance Committee until we hammer out a budget, which we will then reconvene as, will convene as the City Council in order to adopt the budget. So, with no more ado, and tonight we will be hearing a presentation by the city manager. This is his night to shine. And so, Mr. Aspel, I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Just so you know, folks can follow at home, this entire presentation is already on the city's website, concordnewhampshire.gov. If you go to the government page under the budget heading of fiscal year 2027 proposed budget, it's all right there, and so people can just follow at home if they want to. It's also on the city manager's webpage, quick links, FY 2027 proposed budget, and the full presentation can be found on the city manager's webpage under the resources section. So with that, we'll launch into this. So as stewards of the taxpayers' dollars, I hope you'll find this presentation helpful. It's intended to provide an overview, simply an overview of the proposed budget. For fiscal year 2027 budget proposal is a roadmap for continued development of investment by the City Council with citizens and taxpayers of Concord. As you know, this is just a starting point. So I hand it to you. You will make many, many, many vast improvements on it and then take a vote on the final night. But again, it's just a starting point, and you know, everybody recognize it'll be changed many times. Just a recap. So the fiscal management of the city is very strong. We have a AA+ rating from Standard & Poor's. We have a Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. This is our 30th year. This relates to the information we provide and the transparency that goes along with that. 30 years is a record in the state of New Hampshire. We're the only ones with 30 years, and particularly consecutive years. We also have the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for the 11th year. That is the highest award you can receive in governmental budgeting in North America. And that's our 11th year running on that. And that is related to strong ongoing economic development, solid, as cited by the bonding agency, solid practices and policies supported by a very strong institutional framework, stable financial profile with long-term financial planning to address potential challenges, and as you've seen the bond rating before, many glowing statements about the actions of the City Council over the years. Next, looking at a total budget overview, the tax rate proposed in this budget is a 5.5% increase. And you can see we're going from a $154.3 million adopted budget in fiscal year 26, the fiscal year that we're in now, to 156.6. This includes capital improvement projects. And I'll just give you just a rundown so you can put this in perspective with previous years' tax rate increases. So in 2020, you approved a 1.8% increase. In 2021, there was no tax rate increase. In 2022, it was 2.5%. In 2023, it was 4.8%. In 2024, 3.95%. In 2025, 3.47%. And this past year, 3.45%. If you look at that, that is an average of 2.85%, which is below cost of living increases for that period of years. And if you had a tax cap, it's below that tax cap number. So that's very highly unusual in the state of New Hampshire. The CPIU for that same period, again, this is 2.85% for all those years combined. The CPIU for that period is 4.14%. So you're considerably below the rate of inflation. If you adopt the 5.5% as it is proposed right now, which I'm not saying you will, but if you did, that would bring that up to that average up to 3.18% over all those years. Again, well below the cost of living increases for those years. This is a chart the City Council has asked me to put together every year. If you want me to stop, just let me know. Because Concord is very unique in this way, and this is the percent value of the tax-exempt property in the city. And as you can see, we're at least double every other major community comparable to us in the state. So to give you a little perspective here, in 2010, Concord was at 25%. Manchester was at 13% exempt. This is value. I think our numbers are actually understated because we really don't go around and spend a lot of time valuing the State House or the LOB or the prison. If you actually did, though, I think these numbers would be much higher. 23% of the property value in the community is tax exempt, and that number for this year, and that number generally fluctuates between 23 and 29%. So it's kind of on the lower end now. We'll see when the measure and list and the revaluation is done. I think you're going to see that number be considerably higher. It's also imperative to keep this in mind when working on the budget as the impact on the taxpayers, as you always have, because essentially more people or less people are carrying more of a burden than I think in any other community in the state that's comparable to us. Looking at your general fund balance total and unassigned, the unassigned fund balance, as you know, represents the portion of the total fund balance that is spendable, not restricted for anything, or not has been committed or assigned for a specific purpose. Essentially, is the funding that provides the city with the flexibility to deal with emergencies or other unanticipated events. The healthier the unassigned fund balance is, the less the impact an emergency will have on the city's finances. The unassigned fund balance is the balance that the rating agencies use as one of the key benchmarks to assess the city's financial health. In January 2026, Standard & Poor's affirmed the rating of the city a AA+, which is half a notch below AAA rating. Very commendable for achievement for a city such as us. And a testament to the City Council's budgeting over the years. As we look at the unassigned fund balance, we were at 20.6% in June 2025 when we looked at it. Your goal is 20.5%, so you are overachieving your goal. So when you hear concerns about where your fund balance is and how it's been spent, Congratulations, you've not only achieved your goal, you're higher than your goal. When the City Council adopted fiscal year '26 budget last June, $550,000 of unassigned fund balance was used to keep the tax rate down. The total fund balance now stands at $29,828,642, up from $27,810,712. To put these numbers in perspective, when I first came to the city, that number was $4 million. So you can see over 10 years, you've doubled your total fund balance here. Congratulations, that's an amazing achievement over that time. Looking at the budgetary use of fund balance, that needs to be strategic and remain close to the city's goals and not have significant reductions so that the impact of the city's bond rating or cause too big of a challenge for future years. Any significant reduction in the unassigned fund balance, as reporting in the annual comprehensive financial report, may result in a rating agency downgrading the city's AA rating. So again, go back to that previous chart. You're going the right way, and you're going the right way fast. If you look at the use of budgetary use of fund balance, to put this in perspective, in '23, you can see on there, it's $1.45 million. In '24, it's $3.7 million. In '25, it's $4.2 million. Bless you. And in '26, it's $3 million. This year, it's $850,000. Looking at motor vehicle registrations, in 2025, you're at $8.2 million. The revised, that was the actual number. The revised budget for '26 is $8.5 million, and our estimate is $8.45 million. So we're coming in right about there. And for '27, we're estimating a budget number of $8,650,000. Motor vehicle, the reason you have this chart in front of you, motor vehicles are our second largest revenue source. The city anticipates strong motor vehicle registrations due to the high trim levels and prices of cars being purchased in the growth of new apartments and homes in the city. The more homes, the more residents you have, the more cars generally there are, particularly in New Hampshire where there's not a lot of great public transportation, and therefore that translates into auto registrations. Looking at rooms and meals tax, the actual in 2025 is $4.3 million. The revised budget, the budget you are in now that you passed, we estimated $4.4 million. We're coming in at $4.4 million. We're assuming $4.4 million for 2027, assuming the state determines to provide those dollars to the communities. That can change year to year. You have to stay on top of that. Looking at highway block grant, as you can see, that number is pretty steady. Looking at highway block grant, off the chart, if you were to go back 24, which I won't bother you with that number, and with that piece on the chart, that was about $1.1 million. So you can see the amount from the state has gone down a little bit. We don't expect it to go up much higher. You hear issues with all their different revenue sources and the problems that the Department of Transportation is having. So in 2025, the actual was $902,000. We estimated $930,000 for '26, and it's coming in at $930,000. We're estimating $930,000 for '27. So you really see no increase in the revenue, even though the cost of road improvements and sidewalk improvements have gone up. The amount of revenue from the state has not changed. Looking at investment income, you can see the impact on the general fund of investment income when interest rates rise and fall. You can see them change a little bit, and I'll explain that a little bit more. The city is hedging this revenue stream with strategic purchases of certificates of deposit with staggered maturity dates to maintain liquidity and with secure rates. However, if significant rate reductions are made by the Federal Reserve, as has been talked about at the federal level, this will impact the revenue stream. I want to give you a little bit of history on this to show you how this can fluctuate. If you go back to 2020, just after the 2019 era, we were receiving $613,000 in interest income. The next year, in 2021, that went from $613,000 to $60,000. And then in 22, it went up to 82,000, so really an insignificant amount. In 23, it went from 82,000 to 1.6 million. And then in 24, it went from 1.6 million to 2.7 million. And since then, it has been dropping a little bit in 25. The actual was 2.6 million. The revised in 26, what we budgeted this past year was 2.3 million. It's coming in just under 2.4 million. And we're estimating that those numbers will go down again slightly because of the drop in the rate is likely to happen. It's somewhere along the year, so we're budgeting $2.3 million for 2027. So a drop of about $100,000. Looking at general funded debt service as a percent of expenses, this is one of your measurements of where you are with debt. Are you carrying too much or too little debt? The debt service has stayed consistently around 9 to 12% for a number of years. So you can see in 2022, the actual number was 10.5%. In 23, 9.5%. In 24, 9%. In 2025, 9.5%. This past year, you budgeted 9.76. You're about 9.89. And now you're going up to, because of the debt bonded projects that you've done, to 11.91%. To put that in perspective, your goal is 10 to 14%. So you're well within your goals. You have been for a long time. And talking about financial planning, what we did, as you can see, when we put together the budgets, we anticipated these major projects, capital projects with bonded debt coming up. So we purposely underused the debt. So while your goal is staying between 10 and 14, you can see in 23, 24, 25, 26, you were below the minimum of your goal. So, because you knew that in coming up for this coming year, you were going to need that debt. So again, congratulations on that financial planning. It all came just as exactly as you thought it would. Looking at the total budget overview, fiscal year 27 budget proposes a $2.3 million increase. To put that in perspective, last year's increase was $3.5 million. Fiscal year 2027 capital budget proposes $26.6 million funding decrease. In fiscal year 26 final budget, the final 27 budget was planned to be $51.7 million. The fiscal year 27 proposed budget is now $25 million. So again, if you looked at where we are at this time last year, you expected this year to be at about $52 million. Now we're at $25 million. Note that the 10-year capital budget, when you go through there and look at that program, you asked me to take a hard look at that and make some changes. That has been reduced by $100 million. Again, I'll say that again, $100 million. That is dramatically different than what you see going on in many other communities and many other organizations, even within the city of Concord. So go through, you might want to go through again, look at that capital budget. It is very, very different than the capital budget you looked at last year. For fiscal year, and to show you what those numbers meant, well, I'll leave it at $100 million. That pretty much says it all. Looking at the current property tax rates, simply put, what it means is if you live in the Concord School District, so you can see we have two different tax rates, total tax rates of which people receive a bill for. City only has one rate, which is the same rate in both districts. If you live in the Concord School District, 35% of what you pay in your tax bill goes to municipal operations. That's the city's share of what you pay. So when you take your tax bill, multiply it by 0.35, you can see what comes to the city. The rest either goes to the county or the school district. And if you live in the Merrimack Valley School District, it's only 33% that goes to the city. 67% goes to the county or the school district. So to put that in perspective, in 2010, if you look at the Concord School District, they represented 53% of the taxes that were paid would go to the Concord School District, as in 2010. In 2020, it stayed at 53%. Last year, it went up to 56%. So you can see which direction that's going. Merrimack Valley School District, in 2010, it was 58%. In 2020, it went up to 62%. And now it's back down to 59%. What do your taxes pay for? The amount raised in taxation, excluding overlay and veterans credit, is $56,957,819 and supports these four areas. Essentially, the proportions are the same as last year. So essentially, what you pay in taxes, if you look at that total amount, that would cover your fire department, your police department, general services, and the debt service. Note that the amount proposed for war credits is $525,000. That's an increase of 22% from last year. Last year was $431,000, and an increase of 96% for fiscal year '25. Because you've been granting greater credits for veterans and whatnot, and of course that is now reflected in the amount of money that you need to put in. Note that the amount proposed for overlay is $285,000. That is an increase of 43%. Last year it was $200,000, and that's in consideration of the ongoing reval work. When those, and this will not be enough money. But when those results come in, people will come in for abatements, as they should, if they think the number is unfair, and we'll have to pay abatements for that. But so we're putting a little bit more money into in anticipation of that. So here's a look at again, general fund overview. You can see how much public safety is, general services, community development, leisure and information. So leisure is Parks and Recreation, library and information technology, health, and then general government. General government would be the manager's office, legal office, clerk's office. Looking at that another way, same amount of dollars. If you see how much is involved in compensation, so essentially the contracts and the compensation for the contractual employees, the benefits associated with the employees, debt service, outside services, transfers, utilities, insurance, capital outlay. You can essentially see what the breakdown is. We're very much a service industry, and you can see that reflected in the costs here. Budget-to-budget comparisons. This is something Council's always been very much interested in. So looking at these numbers, just as I think you all know, a 1% tax rate increase generates $569,000. You might want to have that number handy when people talk to you. $569,580. So every 1% the tax rate goes up, generates $569,580. The City Council is under contract with all the unions. Those costs associated with potential future contracts are located in the compensation adjustment line under the general overhead full-time. So the monies are all, unlike a lot of organizations, any monies that you think you're going to need to enter into contracts are already in the budget. You don't have to go back generally, and unless it's unusual, unless you do something unusual with a contract, you don't have to go back and then appropriate additional dollars. Medical insurance costs are up 9.5%, while dental insurance costs are up 7%. Again, in comparison, I think you all remember from last year, both of those were zeros. The New Hampshire retirement system employer costs have increased by $528,000, and that's really wages. The more you pay in wages, the more the retirement contribution goes up, because the rates have actually stayed the same, because remember they change every other year. So the rates have stayed the same for this fiscal year as they were last fiscal year. We're proposing an increase in the use of unassigned fund balance to keep the tax rate lower. So if you want to know why that number is up a little bit, is to try to keep that taxes down. General fund debt service is up $2.4 million due to the increase in costs of bonded projects approved by the City Council. Now I'll take a look at some of the projects that I'm recommending in the budget that I think these are some things you'll be wrestling with over time to see whether or not this is something the community can afford. The replacement of police vehicles are used in the marked fleet for 3 years, then transferred to the unmarked fleet for 2 years. So that's 4 new police vehicles, and that's the cost for 4 new police vehicles. The transfer from highway reserve for road work is decreased in funding by $267,000 or 9%. These funds go towards capital paving program, sidewalks, bikeways, streetscape improvements, and road corridor improvements in fiscal year '27. 2 years ago, the city began to include funding for sidewalks I'm going to talk about that. So that's where a lot of the money now is going. You're going to see a lot more money for sidewalk improvements in this budget going forward. That corresponds with those roadway improvements because you want them synchronized with those roadway improvements themselves. At the airport, there are projects that use airport bonds and airport capital transfer funds, not general fund obligation bonds or general fund capital transfer dollars. So those are airport dollars or state dollars or federal dollars, not general taxpayer dollars. There is a $1 million airport bond project with no federal or state funds because it's not eligible to replace the fuel farm system to comply with current New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services regulations. The current fuel facility at the airport was installed in 1996, so we want to make sure it stays functioning, actually to protect the neighborhoods in the area. You don't want any leaks at all. In addition, there is the replacement of the snow blower, the tow-behind sweeper, sander with the liquid system, ice removal spreader for the dump truck, with the snow removal equipment. So again, we've got to plow a lot. All that pavement out there needs to get plowed somehow. This equipment purchase is funded through the use of $693,000 in federal funds. That's 90% of the total cost of the project. $38,500 in state funds. That's 5% of the total cost of the project. And $38,500 in airport capital transfer funds, airport cash, or 5% of the total cost of the project. As you can see, there are no general fund dollars used here, and therefore no property tax revenue is applied. Also note that because there are federal and state funds involved, and I'm just using this as an example because you're going to see several of these, for approval, we would return to the City Council for approval to accept those funds if received, and then appropriate the dollars to undertake the project. So we don't ask you to appropriate the dollars unless you actually have those other dollars in hand. There's a replacement for a fire engine is recommended in the amount of, and fire engines now go for $1.3 million, and it'll probably take at least 2 years to actually receive that once we order that. So this replaces a 2021 engine, so it looks like, boy, are we doing that a little early? No, we're not, because we know by the time we get it, we're gonna have to live with what we got for at least another 2 years. The water rate increase is driven by 3 things: compensation, that's the contracts, reduced revenue from interest income, because we expect that to go down a little bit, and capital investments, all the improvements we're making to the water system. A 6% increase is recommended. You want to know what 6% means on a monthly basis for the average resident, so that's $1.65. The wastewater rate increase is driven by compensation, so that's wages and costs. Continued reduced income from leachate processing. So we used to take leachate in. We've talked about this. Council Schloss and I have talked about it. We used to take leachate in from other sources, and you could make a whole lot of money doing that, but actually it creates all kinds of problems for the environment and for the river. So we stopped doing that, and that was quite a hit to the revenue, but it's the right thing to do. We also, from continued capital investments to further housing and economic development. So as you know, you approve projects to make sure we can support the additional housing that's going on, particularly up on the Heights. So 15% increase is recommended for this year, and 15% increase means $5.72 for the average home in Concord per month. The Everett Arena project includes, let's see, that's down the bottom left-hand side. The Everett includes 2 new compressors scheduled for replacement that are critical to the ice-making process. Existing ones were manufactured in 1949 and 1950 and are used. We got them used at a garage sale, I believe, and installed 60 years ago when the arena was built. It's become exceedingly difficult to find replacement parts. By moving the plant outside of the building envelope, we reduce the potential for an ammonia leak inside the building and improve the safety of the occupant. We are working to see a longer service life on much of the underslab piping and equipment by switching from a corrosive brine solution to a glycol chilling system. We anticipate substantial energy savings by using variable output compressors, plate and frame chillers, and programmable control sequencing. We will actively seek utility rebates for this more efficient plant. In regards to the structure, the new EPA ammonia safety requirements mandate 2 means of egress from the mechanical room. So that's what we'd have to do if we wanted to stay in the existing facility. We do not anticipate any loss of parking. We do not anticipate any adjustments to our LWCF grant, or agreement. So as you know, we have an agreement out there from years ago. We accepted federal money for improvements. The proposed budget uses $850,000 in fund balance, which is an increase of $300,000, in part to keep the proposed tax rate increase lower. With $200,000 of that applied to the new police headquarters, the project, so of the $300,000 increase, $200,000 is for the police headquarters, and the projected debt service as previously discussed with the City Council. Looking at the capital improvement program, I just categorized a couple of bigger departments into things, because a lot of people ask you about public safety questions, so you can see where that is. For the fire department, included is $30,000 for systematic replacement of forestry equipment, including 2 floating pumps, 2 portable pumps, 3 mini pumps, 3 chainsaws, and 3 leaf blowers. $835,000 for the replacement of all the portable radios, so we do that all at once for make sure everybody can talk to each other. $180,000 for the replacement of transport stretchers, 4 mechanical CPR devices, and the replacement of 6 nitrox units. $50,000 for the replacement of the failing key box system, and that goes onto the vehicles, all the vehicles. $20,000 for the replacement of the failing fire alarm cable. Again, we want the fire alarms to work and be connected. And $350,000 for the improvement of paved parking areas at the Heights, Broadway, and Central fire stations where the vehicles have to move around. And again, Councilor Schlosser has talked to me about his area and the need for the improvements to the parking lots. The police department, $40,000 for the replacement of ballistic vests. $10,000 for the replacement and maintenance program for rifles. $120,000 for the replacement of handguns. They were last replaced in 2017. $10,000 for the replacement of the video system at and around the police station and the firing range. $363,000 for the replacement of the records management system and computer-aided dispatch system. This system maintains almost all of the department's records. It's a system used to manage and dispatch all of the calls for the service that the department responds, and that is very much in need of replacement. And $80,000 for the replacement of all the radios in the marked cars. If you have taken a ride around listening to the radios, you'll understand why they need to be replaced. Going on to the next slide, golf course improvements and equipment, $200,000 for 3 projects, $50,000 to replace the event tent flooring, $50,000 for upgrades to the driving range, and $100,000 for a triplex mower and to purchase a dedicated greens roller. This would all be done with golf bonds, not general fund dollars. Cemetery improvements include $275,000 to replace an old tin storage shed, and $150,000 that has been waiting many years to be replaced, and $150,000. So if you ask me, can we put it off? Of course, but we'll put it off so many times it's gotten to the point where it's funny in a way, in a sad way. $150,000 for roadway and pavement improvements at Blossom Hill Cemetery, which is, as you know, we're slowly trying to do bit by bit on the cemeteries. A total of $655,000 for information technology, hardware and software replacement. We replace hardware, computers, laptops, monitors, servers, and provide software upgrades throughout the organization. This will replace the fire department's mobile computers. It will upgrade security systems throughout the organization. And this is paid for with a number. I'll give you an example of how we cobble this together. There's $349,000 in general capital transfer, so that's essentially cash. $190,000 in trust dollars, $58,000 in sewer capital transfer, and $58,000 in water capital transfer. So if those systems are going to benefit those other areas, we take dollars from them to help offset the costs. There's $30,000 for engineering design to refurbish and upgrade the HVAC system at the Concord Public Library. General bonds. However, since the City Council approved the resolution involving the item on Monday, that could be your first cut. You can reduce that $30,000. We don't need that anymore because you approved that on Monday night. We repurposed those dollars for the same purpose, but I didn't know. I couldn't be sure that you would do that, so I had to put it in the budget. Now that you've done it, you can remove this $30,000 request. But I already gave you the budget, so I can't take it away. So it's up to you.
next,
So
marked in
you,
red.
so you get the credit. $61,000 in improvements, $36,000 to install new traffic signal controllers at the intersections of DeMonte and Triangle Park, Loudon in the East Mall section, Loudon Road, I say, in the East Mall section, Loudon Road in Dix, Loudon Road and the Walmart's intersection. Those are all our signals. We have to replace those as time comes, or at least the control units. And of course, they're subject to change depending on various development project status. So if we're moving forward with a project and we're working with the developer to make those improvements, we of course wouldn't spend the money until we did some sort of, to make sure it all worked together and the city got the best financial deal that we could. Also, $25,000 to study the signal warrants at the intersection of Loudon Road and Woodcrest Heights.
Thank you.
$65,000 to replace meter maintenance vehicle funded. This is let's say meter, I meant parking meter, funded through parking bonds. So again, that's paid for by the parking fund, not by the general fund, and that was last replaced in 2020. Again, it'll take some time to get that vehicle. $300,000 for the design and permitting of comprehensive structural repairs and renovations to the State Street parking garage based on the preliminary renovation option in the garage study report, and that is funded with parking bonds. So again, not a general fund cost. $515,000 for the construction of I mentioned the use of how we're going to spend the highway reserve dollars and how they're not in the highway program. Well, they aren't, but they are, and here's where they show up. So the crosswalk bus stop improvements on North Main Street, Store Street to Booton Street, to be coordinated with the paving program funded with general highway reserve. So this is, you've talked a lot about that, about the needs for that and the number of folks who are on there. This is where that comes about. And $200,000 for the design of corridor improvements on portions of Pembroke Road from Loudon Road to New Hampshire 106, funded with general highway reserve. Those corridor improvements, when funded next year, will include road reconstruction, rehabilitation, curbing and drainage, existing sidewalk improvements and new sidewalk construction, pedestrian and vehicular safety measures, full ADA compliance, incorporating multimodal travel, streetscape, and landscape improvements. Okay, next project, we have $235,000 for airport repairs, which includes $125,000 to scrape and paint Hangar 1, and $100,000 to install ductless splits in Hangar 4. Funding sources airport bonds. Also included is $10,000 for tree removal on ongoing maintenance to meet FAA requirements, funded with airport capital transfer dollars. Again, all airport funds here. $370,000 for airport master plan update to include an obstacle action plan and runway 1735 length study. The funding source is 90% federal, 5% state, and 5% city through the airport fund. Again, you get in line for these. You talk to the state and the feds about the projects you're interested in, and when dollars come available, they're allocated for you. So we try to take advantage of those when those dollars are made available. $628,000 and water plant improvements include $400,000 for filter and under drain improvements funded with water bonds, and $228,000 in maintenance shop work funded with water capital closeout funds, so previous funds from projects that were completed under budget, you reuse those dollars. These projects were recommended as part of Phase 2 improvements in the Water Master Plan in 2007, so we're still actually trying to implement improvements that were designated back then. $76,000 for additional funds for water main cleaning and lining for School Street, which was a fiscal year 25 appropriation. We originally appropriated $550,000 for that, but because of increase in cost for materials, we need another $76,000 if you want us to do that project. $80,000 for an update of Phase 1 of the 2006-2010 Water Master Plan Capacity Study with Water Capital Transfer Fund. So it's again to look at the next 20, 30, 40 years of where we are with water. $270,000 for water line and meter extension, includes $250,000 for easement acquisitions and installation of approximately 2,300 feet of water mains and stations, and $20,000 for design and metering structures and a distribution system for the Russell Shea Gardens on Birch Street, and that would be funded through donations and other sources that we can hopefully identify to make that work. $402,000 for the routine replacement of meters, automatic meter reading devices, gate valves, as well as associated components and equipment, funded through the combination of Water Capital Transfer Fund, water bonds, and water capital closeout dollars. $30,000 for routine replacement, upgrading of the supervisory control of data acquisition system, a software system. This system was first implemented in 2005, it needs to be updated, and assists with monitoring and operating equipment at the water treatment plant. Give you an example, if you go back far enough, the water treatment plant had three shifts of folks. We're down to one shift now, and we can do almost anything with an iPad from home on this. So it's really, in case an emergency was to come up or we were notified of a problem. And this also does water tanks and remote pump station improvements, and that is all funded with water capital transfer. $625,000 for replacement of undersized and/or severely deteriorated water mains with new pipe. In this case, Industrial Park Drive from, looks like the Heights is a big winner this year. In the Industrial Park Drive from Chanel Drive, southerly 950 feet. The project will design and construct 950 feet of 12-inch water main to meet water flow demands. This replaces the last 8-inch section on Industrial Park Drive. The majority of the main will be upgraded in 2026. And the estimate includes $100,000 in price increases from the previous year, and this is all funded with water bonds, not general fund. Looking at other capital improvement projects, $86,000 for design, permitting, and bidding for the replacement of 380 feet of deteriorated 30-inch corrugated metal pipe between Manchester Street and Black Hill Road, funded with $64,785 in capital closeout funds and $21,000 in general obligation bonds. $2 million for the Hall Street wastewater treatment plant, includes process upgrades, final design, supervisory control and data acquisitions, software system upgrades, replacement of the roof on the admin gravity belt thickener room with an ethylene propylene diane monomer roof system. That's for our Ward 10 counselor. And that would actually last 40 years. And structural concrete coatings, including process equipment and related piping, corrosive protective coatings, and that would be paid for by sewer capital closeout and sewer bonds. So again, projects that came in under budget plus augmented with bonds. $2.7 million for the Petticoat wastewater treatment plant maintenance. This plant has been in operation since 1974. Most major upgrades were in 2005. The project includes $2.2 million for the replacement of the influent screw pump, number 1, $400,000 for the refurbishment of influent screw pumps 2 and 3, and $130,000 for the supervisory control and data acquisition system upgrades, all funded with sewer bonds. $20,000 to replace the lateral service line inspection camera, hardware and software funded with sewer capital transfer. These are the cameras that we put in the pipes to check their adequacy. Some fascinating videos. I think if you ask Michael, he'll tell you some of the best watching numbers we got.
You got a thumbs up.
Yeah,
you got a thumbs up.
Is actually what we do with the cameras in the sewer pipes. $256,000 for replacement, upgrade, and refurbishment of the aging equipment, the sewer pump stations. The city has 8 pump stations funded with sewer capital closeout funds. $1.9 million as part of a long-range replacement of city highway utility water treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant, Parks and Recreation Department vehicles, and heavy equipment. The replacement plan improves service with more reliable vehicles, lowers costs due to multiple vehicle procurements, and maintenance support. Some examples include a grader replacement, so a grader, you've seen those, you all know what those are. That goes for $385,000. The sidewalk tractors, which
Zambonis. Sorry.
yeah, right. Which Councilor Schultz was trying to let me get her out there on the heights with one. Those go for $238,000. So, and the replacement of 2 sanding units. So sanding units are about $48,000. $75,000 for the construction of 4 level 2 EV chargers at the combined operations and maintenance facility. So electric vehicles, or at least have hybrid vehicles charging. And finally, we're getting close. $328,000 for the Merrimack River Greenway Trail for Phase 3 boardwalk. This includes design, permitting connection between Phase 1 Terrell Park and Phase 2. $263,000 to be funded through a Transportation Alternative Program grant, which we have a letter of intent to fund from the state. The remaining $65,000 will be a donation from Friends of the Merrimack River Greenway Trail, which they have committed to contributing. When funding is in hand, we will return to the City Council for hopefully your acceptance and appropriation and action related to that. $45,000 for the replacement of a front mower for the cemetery. That's replacing a 2015 John Deere, funded with general bonds. $300,000 for Terrell Park improvements. This has a long discussion we've had with a number of folks. I think this is a good idea, but again, I know money's difficult. So this is $300,000 for removal of stumps, grading, and adding loam in the area of the future athletic fields intended as part of a 2023 visioning charrette for the Merrimack River Open Space and Recreation Corridor. Again, this area of the city is the least served by green fields and space available to the public. This is why this is very important to do. This meets one of your values, goals, but again, it's $300,000. And this is just simply to make it a field so that children can use it. $475,000 for the White Park Hockey Rink boards improvements and improvements to the White Park Pond. So there are two parts to this. First involves $275,000 to rehabilitate the impervious surface of the hockey rink and install new boards. Second is a separate project to remove the sediment and lotus plants growing in the pond, estimated at $200,000. Regarding this piece, what I just talked about, the pond, these funds, if appropriated, would not be spent until the City Council reviewed all the options and decided on what approach to take, if any, to go forward. The total of $475,000 will be funded with general obligation bonds. So that's something you need to look at if you want to preserve that pond as a pond. It's time to make some decisions, but that's something we'll come and talk to you about. It's not something you have to worry about tonight. $350,000 to replaster the Rollins Park pool. The replastering of the pool begins a new cycle of annual pool refurbishment, which includes the Rolfe Park pool, following year, Keach Park pool, Kimball Park pool. There is no funding to replace the Garrison Park pool. Looking at, but that's up to you. You can decide what to do there. Neighborhood street program. As I previously mentioned, the capital paving program is recommended in the amount of $2 million in fiscal year 27. Note that this amount does not include bridge work or intersection improvement work. In fiscal year 26, we requested the City Council approved a total of $2.8 million. The fiscal year 27 request will combine with the previously reviewed Pembroke Road corridor improvements and the sidewalk bikeway improvement for the construction of the sidewalk, crosswalk, and bus stop improvements on North Main Street. That will be coordinated with the paving program. Totals roughly the same amount as used from the highway reserves. Sustainability initiatives. As you know, the city issued a request for proposal for the lease of the ground-mounted solar array at the old Turnpike landfill. Kearsarge Solar was selected for the construction of this 5-megawatt array. Construction began in the fall of 2025. The original construction completion is anticipated for next month and is on schedule. The city and the Concord School District will benefit from group net metering revenues associated with. The Beaver Meadow Golf Course Clubhouse will be incorporated rooftop solar as part of their project. And the Trails Ranger position is funded and maintained for the position to continue monitoring and management of our trail system. Note, the reason I added that one, is even though you had it last year, is that as the trail system continues to expand, you're going to need, I'm going to recommend that you need additional resources to properly maintain. When you start opening up major trail networks of the Merrimack River Greenway Trail, you're going to need staff support to clean, to patrol, to make sure that those are safe for the users. So again, no surprises coming up. Looking at fund balance, life cycle, this is something Councilor Fennessy and through the Fiscal Policy Advisory Committee worked on very hard last year, and I have this again in this year. I'll go into it a little bit deeper in the next slide. So we've continued this new section of the budget to help explain how assigned and unassigned fund balance is allocated and used for each fiscal year. This is a budgetary entry only for revenues. Expenses are spent or transferred as authorized. In most years, the city has made use of budgetary fund balance through excess revenues collected in other areas or having less expenses than budgeted. Looking at the fund balance cycle here, and you all have this in front of you, so you probably can't read it on the screen, but following the use of fund balance from the allocation of assigned fund balance to use during the year, and then rolling back to the unassigned at the end of the year, and then through the allocation process again for the next year. Each year during the audit, I tell the auditors how much to allocate to assigned fund balance and provide them with the details of what that assignment is for. Typically, the majority of the assignment is to transfer to reserves for use in future budgets for the city council to use in the capital or operating budget needs, as we talked about tonight. This is a way for the city council to manage or reduce the amount of bonding needed for projects and to manage increases in the tax rate. If you look at the chart, the first column shows fiscal year 2024 allocation of $3,709,760. This includes $3,049,000 for the transfer to reserves, $100,000 for overlay, and $560,760 was budgeted in the fiscal year 25 as use of fund balance that the city council adopted in the fiscal year 25 budget. This is all identified in a surplus report that was presented to city council in December for public hearing and action that you took in January of 2025. Keeping in mind that the funds are not actually recorded as revenue in fiscal year 2025, if you look at the second column, you will see that this amount is added to the unassigned fund balance at the end of the fiscal year 2025 to start the cycle again. Now let's go back to the first column, where you'll see that the $3,709,760,000 is reduced from the assigned fund balance designated for the end of the fiscal year 2025 and added to the second unassigned designation in the second column. This is all part of what I consider the GFOA, Full Employment Act, how this all works. Then we go back to the first column, and you'll see the $2,050,000 allocated to transfer to reserves and a $655,000 allocated for the use of fund balance in the fiscal year 26 budget. That will make up the assigned fund balance designation for fiscal year 2025, total of $2,705,000. I'll go back to the second column. This amount is also reduced from the unassigned designated along with balance, along with the year-end deficit result of $906,830.85. And just when this is not confusing enough, this is also an adjustment to the non-spendable fund balance, inventories, and prepaid items each year that also increases or decreases the unassigned fund balance. So to recap, at the end of each fiscal year, when we are completing the financial statements with the auditors, the previous year's assigned fund balance rolls back to the unassigned category. The non-spendable fund balance is adjusted to the unassigned category, and then the new assignment is reduced from the unassigned category. This results in an unassigned fund balance at the end of fiscal year 25 of $15,751,058.62. Obviously, very straightforward. The last chart shows the details of what makes up the assigned fund balance for the end of the fiscal year. And just one last thing before we get right to the end, just so you know, this presentation used to be 2.5 hours, so I've really tailored it down for you tonight.
Bless you.
Funding is recommended in this proposal to be maintained. There's one change, and I know I can't make changes to the budget, but there's one change in there that I think I'd ask you to consider. Funding is recommended in the proposal to be maintained for the Concord Coalition to End Homelessness at $60,000. Remember, you increased it from 40 to 60. The organization requested 65 this past year. When I looked at it, I didn't see that additional $5,000, and that would be dedicated for the expanded hours and weekends for the emergency winter shelter and warming center, and I support that request. So if you would, somewhere in your deliberations, again, I'm going to get back to that when we get to that individual section, but I asked you to think about that $5,000, so I think it's well worthwhile. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any, I would just remind the Finance Committee that after our questions on this portion of his presentation, City Manager also will be making a presentation on budget summaries, budget resolutions, and general fund revenue and expense. So, questions?
That makes it,
Councilor Schultz.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. That makes it sound like I shouldn't ask anything.
No, it's just letting you know that there's something more coming.
Okay, a couple dumb questions. That might be brilliant. I don't know. I noticed under the items for the police that there's an upgrade for the video fire range system. I'm also, as a state rep also, I've toured the NHTI facilities. They have a really nice gun range that I'm sure they use all the time, but they also have the video system there. I don't know to what degree that being so close to our soon-to-be police station location, if that would save us any money to utilize their services rather than building or upgrading our own. I guess that's the whole question.
I think, so yes, we've looked at that, and I think when we're actually talking to the police department, we can talk about that further. We'll have the police chief here. I don't know if he's back there now, hopefully not.
He's not.
Okay, so we've looked at it in the past, but it's very difficult. We found the same thing with why we have our own fire training facility. To schedule when essentially many other folks are using it, and it's very, very difficult. So we actually have a facility now. So the system actually is just to be able to keep an eye on that property to make sure it isn't being abused by others, type of thing. So it's really, as you know, it's not really not that expensive. But we have looked at doubling up and using the state, but it's not conducive to getting all the training in that we want to get in. But again, when the chief is here, I'm sure he can give you a much
Okay.
better answer to that.
Other questions? Councilor Fennessy.
Thank you. We can get into this in more detail, but you mentioned the Terrell Park field improvements. Is the idea that the improvements would involve creating a space that could be used for athletic space?
Correct.
Thank you.
Councilor Brown.
Yes, just a couple of big general questions. So 569,580 equals 1%. And this budget is 5.5%. If we want to cut it by 5.5%, that sum is 3,132,690. And just in looking at this, it looks like the budget, including capital projects, is 156,626,000, and it says that that's including capital projects. When you say including capital projects, is that including, like, we bonded everything and we're paying it all at once, or is that just the first year's debt service for those projects that are included?
It's if you simply take the capital budget, and they'll correct me if I'm wrong, if you simply take the cost of what we're identifying those projects. So the $3.1 million for the arena, that would be added to that number. That would be part of that number. So even though you would actually pay for that over a number of years, it's all right there.
Oh, okay, that's really good to know. Thank you.
Follow-up?
Yes, follow-up, if you don't mind. Does this budget include the class and compensation study numbers? That we approved the report, so
right.
did this, and I know that there's increases in benefits and everything else. Does it include those numbers from that class and compensation study?
No, it doesn't, because you have not determined, you haven't agreed what those numbers are. Those are negotiations that you have to do with the individual unions for that. But you do have money in reserves to implement portions of that if you chose to do that. Okay. But that's something that you would, because there's a whole number of contracts, you may not decide to do. This is too much, but you may decide not to do the whole thing at once anyways. You may do it, phase it in over time if you want.
Yeah, I was just curious if it was yes or no.
Follow-up.
Yeah. Do we have a number? I know we approved a number of projects last year's budget. Can we find out, or this might be a yellow paper, how many projects were not bonded that were approved? I guess I'll put that in the yellow sheet.
You don't need to. It's if you look at last year's budget, you can tell.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was kind of looking at. Follow-up?
Follow-up.
Yes. Special revenue funds, do they contribute to the unassigned fund balance? Like if there's overages in any of the special revenue funds, does that extra money go into is that, how we compile all of it in January?
No, they're held.
They're separate?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council,
Welcome, Mr. LeBrun.
So the way that it works with each one of the special revenue funds or the enterprise funds, whatever their so-called profit and losses at the end of the year basically flows back into the fund balance of that fund. So if you think about, when we go through each one of those special revenue and enterprise funds on the June 1st meeting, we're going to look at the pro formas. And on those pro formas, at the very bottom line, we talk about that working capital number. So that's really where the dollars roll into. And that working capital number is made up of a number of different things. But that working capital is like the fund balance in the general fund. So those dollars don't automatically, if there's a profit at the arena, those dollars don't roll into the unassigned fund balance for the general fund. It stays with the arena.
Thank you, that's what I was.
Let's pause a
Sorry,
second.
yeah,
Is there anyone
got
else
a
who has a
bunch.
question?
I've already asked.
I know, who hasn't asked? Okay, Counselor Brown.
Thanks.
Oh, I'm sorry, Counselor Foot.
Oh, thank you. A couple of questions. Going back to the unassigned fund balance, so at the beginning of this, Mr. Manager, you mentioned that we had about $30 million in reserves, but there's only about $15 million in the unassigned fund balance. Is that correct? 15,200,000 or so? Or has that been depleted more now as, yeah, that's 2025.
Right, that's where we are right now. So has it changed? Is that what you're asking? Has it, since then? So you're asking? Right now, it is $29,828,642.
Could you repeat?
Follow up.
But that includes all of the reserve accounts.
That includes all of our,
Right.
yes.
So just
right.
strictly the unassigned fund balance, not including the reserves, it's about $15 million.
Yes, that sounds right.
Okay.
Welcome back, Mr. LeBrun.
I feel like you should stay there.
We're going to put you on wheels.
I'm trying to do this on the,
No, you're
looking
really,
at the chart.
You're pretty good at math, though. So basically, the total fund balance is what you're asking about. That's the 29.5 million, which is roughly $30 million. So that includes all of the fund balance items that we have. It includes the unassigned, the assigned, the spendable, the non-spendable, the dedicated. So all of those fund balances roll up to that total fund balance number. The unassigned number is the number that is not dedicated to anything specifically.
Okay.
And that's the number that is used when we talk about 20.6% of expenses. That's the number that the rating agencies use when they look at us and say, this is the measure of the health of our community based on that unassigned number.
Thank you very much for that.
Follow up.
Health insurance went up, is projected to go up 9.9%. Is the city, the taxpayers bearing that total amount, or is it some sharing with the employees? Is it based on an 80-20, 90-10, 95-5? How does that work?
90-10. Blue's 90-10.
Yeah, we have a 90-10 split with all of the contracts and the non-union employees. So the 9.5% increase is the total amount of the rate that went up. Obviously, the actual expenses are a little different because you have a change in distribution based on whatever anybody selects, but it's split 90-10 between the employer and the employee.
Follow up.
Did I also read this correctly, that the road pavement program is proposed to be flat in 2027?
Correct.
Okay, and then also,
Follow up.
thank you. You mentioned the parking improvement at a couple of the fire stations in the amount of $350,000. Can we drill down on that a little bit based on roads are not seeing any improvement? We're going to spend $350,000 on parking lots?
You could reallocate those dollars for roads if you want.
Or,
But again, this is one of those things we've been looking at, those parking lots for a number of years, and, it's.
and one
One more.
last, thank you. As part of the airport CIP and budget, is there any funds being geared towards accessibility, specifically the water closets?
In this budget, no, but it's something we could reallocate dollars to it. But, I mean, there's money in the airport fund. The question is how quickly you spend the balance now. So there is, when we do the pro forma, we should be able to see how much dollars in there. So if you had a project of $10,000 or $20,000, that's something we could allocate dollars for and add that to it. I wouldn't think it would be that difficult to do.
Thank you, appreciate it,
Okay.
thank you.
Counselor Schultz?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two generic, bigger questions I would like to ask and have been wanting to ask in the previous budgets I participated in, so hopefully I can get a smidgen of latitude for those two bigger pieces. And then, but first, the quick one. You mentioned the electric vehicle charging stations. That seemed to be, in the slide that it was on, something that would be available to the public, or did I misunderstand? I don't remember what you said specifically about
It'd be
who
up-
would be using those.
It would be up to the combined operation maintenance facility, essentially for water vehicles, sewer vehicles, police vehicles, different.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, here's my two bigger ones that we might have to have a bigger conversation offline. So the first one is, how do you decide, because this mirrors conversations we have at home, right? Like, how do you decide when is something replaced? You mentioned 10 years on the firearms, for example, and a certain number of years for your fleet vehicles. How do you come up with those as a general rule? And what latitude could we potentially have with that
Sure.
choices?
So let's use vehicles as an example. So just so you know, Concord is recognized as the leader in vehicle replacement program in the entire state of New Hampshire. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to achieve a balance between the reliability of the vehicle on the road, right? So if it breaks down, does it need to have somebody come out and tow it back and then repair it? The number of staff folks you have to have in the fleet repair vehicle, because we do our own fire department vehicles, we do our own police, we do all those improvements ourselves. So the older your vehicles get, the less reliable they get, the more downtime there is, the more staff you have to hire, the more replacement parts you have to have in there. So you're always trying to get that at the proper level. We have, for example, every year what I ask them to do is, and this, looking at all the vehicles, looking at the hundreds of vehicles that we have, is okay, so an ambulance is going to last this many years based on the quality of the ambulance that we buy. Take a look at it. I know it's programmed to be replaced in 2029, but when 2029 comes around, take a hard look at it. Could we get one more year out of it? And because you really don't get a whole lot of money at auction or trade-ins and whatnot. And if we can, then we do, and we move all those vehicles around, type of thing. So when you have the fire department up here and you ask them about vehicles, they're going to tell you they need a lot more vehicle replacement than I'm proposing here. They would like another engine.
I already knew that.
Exactly, right, replaced. And they're legitimate concerns because they are concerned about something that's broken down. I'll give you an example. Not to belabor it, but when City Council, working with both school districts, decided to make a vast improvement on the sidewalk snow plowing for the walk-to-school routes, the way you solved that was not by increasing. Now, I think you increased it by, I'm thinking about 40% the amount of mileage that you did. The way you did that was not by adding to the number of vehicles. It actually had vehicles that worked. So we took surplus dollars that you had at the end of the year, we bought new sidewalk tractors, replaced the old sidewalk tractors, and they actually stayed working. And we didn't have to pull them down, replace them, and bring them back. So you're actually able to, and we'll be able to stay with that because we replaced them on a regular basis. If you go to a longer replacement cycle, they're going to break down faster, your sidewalks aren't going to get done, and the schools won't be able to open. So it's always this trade-off that you're going back and forth. I think we've achieved a sweet spot in the way we do it, but as vehicles have gotten dramatically more expensive, it's getting harder and harder to stay there. But again, if you look at how much we're spending in vehicle replacements, it's about $1.8 to $2 million a year. We're trying to keep it right about that level.
Okay, thank you.
Follow-up?
This would be the second
Yep.
bucket, but first, I still think we should call them sidewalk Zambonis. Far more fun.
Maybe
But
we
anyway.
should name the.
As long as we put
name the
advertising on it.
The state snow plows.
Yeah, we could sell advertising. I think that's a great idea. The state snow plows, that's a whole other thing. This one is a much bigger issue. I just totally don't understand how this works. And that is, how do you decide when to use a consultant or do a study? And then how do you choose which firm or vendor to use in those cases, because I think if we were to say, how much money do we spend in these studies or, or our consultants, it's a lot of money. So how do you decide when we need to use a consultant or to do a study versus when we wouldn't? And then how do you do that bidding process?
Sure. So let's give you an example. One of the ones that is in here is for the water master plan. The water master plan was done many years ago, and you're a completely different city now than you were when that was first done. So the question comes, essentially what it tells you is based on growth, and actually you'll want to tie it to your master plan, right? Where the growth is going to occur, what type of improvements you need to make. So if we're going to go out and do improvements on a certain road system, do you need to upgrade that water line, the diameter of that? What type of improvements do you need to make at the pump stations? What improvements you need to make at the water tank? So it's very, very involved. But essentially, you do the studies, and they last you, for a study like that, will probably last you a dozen years or at least a dozen years. And many times what you're doing is you're updating. You're not starting from scratch. You're taking a fresh look at, based on the new activity that's gone on. So all of a sudden you had, a good example would be Steeplegate Mall changes from a mall with very little usage of water and sewer, other than maybe the food court, to 700 units of housing, give or take, and other development in the area. You're going to need a whole lot different water supply and sewer than, so looking at that. So that's just one example of the way you've looked at it in the past, right? So now you have other developments. When you do, I'll give you an example, Garvin's Falls Road redevelopment, you've got 1,000 acres of undeveloped property in there, of which probably 800 is developable. When you do that, you're going to have to upgrade your water tower and support for everything that's in there. What type of improvements do you want to make, and what do you want to be able to support in there? So that's what, in the way you do it, for something like that, you go out to bid. And you put many times we'll either go out and do a request for proposal, which sometimes you get good proposals, sometimes you get, but the problem is when you get those proposals, you don't know many times the quality of what you're getting. Or we'll do a request for qualifications, right? So essentially we'll grade the applicant, so to speak, based on how good they are, our experience with them, other people's experience with them, and then make a determination, and then negotiate a price with them. So it's done different ways and different things.
I think I have more questions, but I need to stew on them.
Okay, Councilor Kretovic.
Just a clarifying statement on that. The council would have already set a budget on that for the request for proposals, and you're negotiating based on a budget item that we've already kind of started with. So when it comes over, if someone were to come in over budget, it comes back to the
We'd
council.
have to come back to you and say,
Yep.
we need additional dollars.
So there is a starting point, but it starts with the
we
council.
come up with an estimate of that.
Councilor Kurtz.
Thank you, and to follow up on that, when you're determining whether or not we have the capacity or knowledge in-house to make such a determination versus going out and seeking an outside consultant, thank you, Counselor, what are the factors that go into that choice between reaching the determination about the sort of projects you laid out in-house versus seeking outside consultant?
Sure. So there's, so for example, we wouldn't know how to design a new building for the arena for handle a glycol system. So we would actually get someone with a specialty who does that to not only come up with the original design, which we then, based on the design, you put the design out to bid and get the cost, you get the dollars to actually build it. So there's a lot of specialties. We use many consultants at the airport because unfortunately, I'm probably one of the most knowledgeable people about airports in the city, and I don't know a whole lot. But it's one of those things, because I got to work on the Manchester airport when I first came to New Hampshire. So there's a lot of it has to do with skill, but a lot of it also has to do with bandwidth, and what we can actually get done in a reasonable amount of time, and have somebody run the, we only have so many people who run the water plant. And it's the person who runs the water plant with the mechanics associated with that, also the person who can think about and work with all the other departments in terms of what the needs of water are going to be. So generally, we like to have people who've done it before, and we're a big enough community, we make sure we get good qualified folks to do that.
Thank you.
Counselor Brown?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Then Counselor Kayla.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
So I have a bunch, but I'll just ask the one.
Okay.
So, going back to the overview of the budget is proposed 156.6 million. If we remove the capital projects from, how do you determine that the tax rate needs to be 5.5%? Like, are you basing that on, like, what do we need to raise? Is it,
That's coming up in the next part of the presentation.
awesome, okay.
Counselor Kayla?
Sure. Yeah, my question just back to the fund balance. So our bond rating, that's kind of like in personal finance, like a credit score, right? Sort of?
Your FICO score.
Okay, gotcha. So, I suppose my question is, you and Mr. LeBrun mentioned, we don't want to spend too much out of that, take too much out of that because it could affect the bond rating. So like when I think, you have a credit card and you want to keep your usage under 30%, then you get dinged a little bit, right? Yeah. So can you be more specific about, where that danger zone is for taking from fund balance and at what point would that potentially affect our bond rating? If that makes sense.
Brian will correct me if I'm wrong, but I look at it from the standpoint of, is it sustainable? So if you were to take money out of this account to fund any account, to fund a certain part of the budget to keep the tax rate down. Now, if you're going to have another revenue source that's going to replace that in the future, then okay, that might work for that year. But if you don't have a plan, so the rating agencies are going to ask Brian and I, do you have a plan? How are you going to replace those dollars? And if you can't replace those dollars through growth or revenue source of some sort to a sufficient enough standard that shows you've actually managed and have a plan, then essentially what they'll say is, well, you're becoming reliant on that. So if you were to take dollars out and you can't really put them back in, it doesn't have to be necessarily the next year, but soon thereafter, then you become reliant on that, and eventually that balance will go down. So you see that balance going up. Many places that balance is going down. And as you start to spend those dollars, they're going to say, well, that really isn't sustainable. So eventually you're going to have a huge tax spike to actually be able to manage that. And then we try to avoid, obviously, you've been very successful avoiding that.
Okay.
Follow up?
It's a different question altogether.
Yeah,
Is that okay?
go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. You mentioned the percentage of properties that are not on our tax rolls being somewhere like 25%.
23.
23%? Okay, yeah. Does that include like the properties the city owns?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, perfect. How many properties does the city own? I'm just curious.
I can, is it important? I can absolutely get it for you.
Okay. I'm sure I could also look it up myself.
I think one of the things to add is what you really think about is schools and churches and state buildings and county buildings and federal buildings. It just goes on and on and on. And because we're a center, we're in most capitals have that same situation. That's why one of the reasons you're very unique.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Brown?
Yes, thank you. I'll try to be super quick. On page 9, 79E incentive, you said it's listed, it says it's valued at $400,000. Does that mean that they're paying that amount, $400,000, or because it's 79E, when the 5 or 7 years is up, that's what they will be paying taxes on?
On page 9.
Page
I'm
9
trying
at
to
the very
follow
bottom of the presentation.
The full budget.
No, it's in
it.
this.
On the 9th slide? Oh, that's not the presentation.
Oh, sorry, it's in our, I thought it was in our, yeah, it's on page 9 of the,
Is it the transmittal letter?
yeah,
Counselor?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
I didn't present that tonight.
Right, no, that's what I was reading, because I thought that's what you were presenting. It just says, by 79E community revital, blah, 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 incentive valued at approximately 400,000. So it will be valued at that when 177 North Main Street, when that has expired, the 79E.
I believe, and Matt asked
Incentive?
Matt to go forward, but I think that $400,000 is what is the value now.
Is that what it is now?
Welcome, Mr. Walsh.
Good evening. So the $400,000 is I believe that was a tax, community, it's an RSA 79E, Community Revitalization Tax Relief Incentive. I believe they got a 7-year tax incentive there, and the combined savings over the 7 years to the developer is $400,000.
Oh.
So the value that the city gave up in taxes that the developer is saving is approximately $400,000 over 7 years combined.
Okay, thank you, that is clearer, all right, for developer, all right.
Follow up?
Yes. The water rate increase and the wastewater rate increase per month per household, could you give me those numbers again? I know you said it and I didn't write it down fast enough.
Remember, the water was $1.65.
Yeah, wastewater was 572.
572 for wastewater and a dollar, what was that?
65.
65.
Awesome. Next question. Your Honor, may I just I have a couple.
Follow up?
Yep, follow up. Cemetery improvement, I think it was like 425,000. Can any of that come out of the trusts that there are, the cemetery trusts that we have?
Let me check that. That's the one with the cross, okay. Plus the replaced shed, so we'll have to look at the trust to see if we can use that. And the other one's for roadways, so no, I'd say no on the roadways. And that's, if you figure it's $150,000 of that total amount. We could look at it, we'll see if this, yeah.
I was just curious.
Follow up?
Follow up, yes, and this is the last one for this. I believe at one of our more recent council meetings, I had asked about the Lotus plant cleaning, and you had said, I don't know what that machine is called, but David, you'd said it was 22,000 for that.
Okay.
I remember that number because I had asked it, David Gill wasn't here, and I think I had said, what, yeah.
I remember that.
I'll have to look it up, because that's what I believe it had been said. All right, I'm done, thank you.
All set? Council Fennessy.
I was going to say on Lotus cleaning, I know it's not 22,000. It's closer to, I think, 20 to 200,000. It's between 2 and 400,000, I think, depending on how much we go down and actually dredge the pond in order to do it.
This was something that I remember. I'll have to go back and watch.
Talked about it a lot at our pack.
We talked about it. It was the city manager I asked, how much does it cost for that machine to kind of troll around? Councilor, you're talking about actually dredging the pond.
That's what the proposal is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what the proposal
but,
is for.
right, but that's a bog. That, I remember talking to somebody, that's not sand at the bottom, that is a bog, that nobody
Well,
knows
half
how
of it
far
is.
down it goes.
Half of it is.
It's deep.
Okay, let's get.
Anyways, we can go on, yep.
All right, all right. Any other questions for the city manager? No. Okay. Mr. City Manager, would you like to move to item number 5 on our agenda?
Absolutely.
No. You
Okay, so now you want to go to your schedule, and so I will start there. So what you have been doing in the past, if you want to continue to do that, your public hearings are held at the end of each night's Finance Committee meeting, and that will show the public has a chance each evening to weigh in, and I think you said that at the beginning of the meeting. So as discussed in my earlier presentation, the budget provides a spending plan for both operating and capital budgets. It is in line with the City Council's goals and objectives. You can see on item number 4 on your agenda, you don't need to open it, so save yourself some time there. That's just the meeting schedule, the transmittal letter, the budget brief, which I just went through all of that. So you want to go to item number 5, budget summaries, resolutions and general fund revenues and expenses. And if you open that attachment, as long as everybody knows what I'm talking about. Okay. Starting on page 35, and I'll move through this quickly because most of you are quite familiar with this. On pages 35 through 40, those are the revenue and expense summaries for each fund by function and then by classification. And as you can see at the bottom of page 36, the last column, the total expense for all the funds, including capital, is $156,626,337. This amount is $2.3 million more than the fiscal year 26 adopted budget, noting that $41 million for the police station project was not included in the original adopted budget last year. Had this been included, the total FY27 budget would have been $38.6 million less than fiscal year 26 budget. I'll go over the budget changes by department and fund in more details as I progress through my presentations in the following weeks. The next few pages break down revenue and expenses by classifications with the same total amount. So again, this goes back to that chart that shows you a different way of looking at it. Next, we'll go to the organization chart and staffing. So you want to go to page 41. Again, this is just intended to kind of lead you through, and the community through how the budget works. Continue on page 41 of the city's organization chart. The remaining pages 42 through 50 provide the city staffing by department and summary of changes. There are 3 notable changes included in this budget, and then those are listed on page 49. So folks are looking to see how staffing has changed. And I recommend these changes. In human services, this changes the administrative coordinator position from a shared between departments to a part-time position solely in the human resources department. In the community development department, this is the other side of that shared position with human resources, and change the position to a part-time position solely in community development. The hours between departments are slightly up by 0.2 full-time equivalents, but again, these are part-time positions, not full-time with benefits. In the Parks and Recreation Department, 1 part-time custodian position is eliminated, reducing hours for 1 guest service associate position, and increasing the hours for another part-time guest service associate. And the total change is 0.11 FTEs. Overall, if you look at all the changes in the budget, it provides for a reduction of 0.84 full-time equivalent positions. So there's, in essence, a reduction in staffing. Next, on the same page, and there's a graph of all the full-time equivalent employees by general, wastewater, water, and all special revenue funds combined. So you can see how the staffing is broken up. And I'm glad to answer any questions before we move to the resolutions.
Any questions for the city manager? Councilor?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Keach.
Mr. Espel, do you know roughly how many open positions there are currently?
I don't think I do. Yeah, we've been working on that just to have it ready. So.
And a follow-up, Your Honor?
Follow up.
And the direction I'm going in is what would it look like if we froze open positions? And I would suggest, with the exception of perhaps our planner and public safety positions. And so if you could look into that.
Certainly.
Going forward, I'll ask the same question when public safety comes.
I'll have it for you at the next meeting.
We don't need it.
Okay.
Whenever public safety comes up, I'll
Okay.
probably be asking the same
Okay.
question.
Councilor Kurtz.
Thank you. I'm looking at page 35 of the budget summary, and it appears to me, if I'm reading it correctly, that the Pennacook Village TIF District revenue is down, or in the 27 budget, about $300,000, and the Sears block is down ever so slightly from 26 projected about $100,000. Can you just explain why?
Sure. Mr. Walsh, are you done?
So a couple of nuances there. First with Pennacook. As part of the fiscal '26 budget, which we're in right now, we transferred about $305,000 of impact fees from the impact fee fund over to the TIF district, the Pennacook Village TIF district, to pay for debt service for CIP 30, which is the Hoyt Whitney project. And so part of the big deviation there is that was a one-time revenue to the TIF district, so that's what that adjustment's there.
Okay.
Related to Pennacook and the Sears Block district is we are releasing more captured assessed value and captured tax revenues out of both the Pennacook district and the Sears Block district this year. So Pennacook is going to be increasing from 15% of released value to 20%. So that reduces the amount of revenue that's in the TIF because we don't show the captured revenue that we're releasing. We only show the revenue the TIF is keeping. And also in Sears, we're going from 20% release to 30% release. So again, that's also affecting what the net revenue is for the district because we're releasing back to the general fund to help the taxpayers with the tax rate. So those are the major changes there.
Follow up?
Follow up.
Just to restate, to make sure I get it, it shows as less revenue here, in part because of the one-time allocation of the impact fees.
Yep.
But in the other case, the second part you were explaining, the money is still being earned in the TIF district. We're putting it into the general fund so that it's offsetting tax rate increase. So while it may look lower here, it is still showing up for the budget overall and the taxpayers.
Correct.
Just in a different spot.
Yeah, we
Okay,
don't,
thank
we don't, correct, yeah.
Okay.
Just a note, so when you look at, does it all get into the general fund, the answer is no,
Okay.
because the vast majority goes to the school districts.
Right.
So it doesn't,
Right,
you
a
only
good
get a
portion goes
third,
to the school district.
33, 35%, most of it goes to the school districts.
Thank you very much for that.
You're very welcome.
Councilor Brown.
Yes, actually following up on Councilor Kurtz's question, the money that's released, doesn't some of it go to the Economic Development Reserve?
So the way that the TIF districts are structured, and if this is too far, Your Honor, and you want to wait until we get to the TIF night.
Go ahead, you can answer it. I know you do a great job.
We structure our tax increment finance districts to repay not only bonded debt when we go out and we sell it on the market, which we do for things like the Store Street parking garage that we built 20 years ago, and CIP 30, which is Hoyt Whitney Road, intersection improvement that we did for the Market Basket project up in Pennacook. But we also typically get TIF districts going with contributions from the Economic Development Reserve Fund. And when we do that, because typically when we create a TIF district, it isn't generating revenue yet, but it may be incurring expenses. So we use that as seed money to help those districts get going. So years go by, and we end up, once the district is stabilized and it's producing enough net operating income, we start repaying the Economic Development Reserve. So you'll notice in the budget that we are doing that in Pennacook this year to the tune of about $67,000 or so. We're also doing that in the Sears Block district, which is a significant figure because there was about $2.5 million of economic development reserve that was put into the Sears Block district years ago to help with the Store Street parking garage and other improvements in downtown. So we're repaying those, so the dollars are there. So when the city wants to make other economic development investments, whether they're TIF related or some other form of economic development investment, the dollars are there, so you can begin the process again.
Follow up.
So where is that, if I wanted to see, hey, how much more is going to be paid back into the Economic Development Reserve because it was previously used for seed money, where is that?
I think we disclosed that. It's definitely discussed in the narrative for the Pennacook Village TIF district, which I only know this because I was looking at it earlier today, which is page 212 of the budget.
Okay, so it's in the budget.
And the Sears Block is somewhere in the same neighborhood of that page number. I can't
Okay.
remember if we talked about it there in the narrative or not. But.
And then when you look at the pro formas, you'll see if we're, like, for example, we're starting this and it goes for multiple years, you'll see it as a revenue in the pro formas
Yeah.
to help.
So looking for
Follow up.
Yes, this is, I just had a question, just want to make sure I'm looking at it right. On page 37 and 39, it shows the revenue for the special revenue funds, and then on page 39, it shows the expenses, but they're not broken out by the special revenue categories. It looks like it's, you know, all the compensation for the special revenue, you know, airport, parking, conservation. Is that right? That's,
Because this is just a summary.
okay, that's just the summary, okay.
Later on, in other areas of the budget, there's all the details.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Council Fennessy.
I just had a quick one for Mr. Walsh on the TIF districts. I presume even though we're seeing lower amounts in those TIF districts as far as revenue, we're retaining an appropriate amount to cover whatever additional expenses we expect to get paid out of those districts.
Yes, all of them have, the fund balances are discussed in the budget for each one of those. Yes, we're maintaining a solid fund balance in all three of the districts, the North End Opportunity Corridor, which is the Horseshoe Pond area, the Pennacook Village District, which is downtown Pennacook and Exit 17, and the Sears Block District, which is really Depot Street, the Hills Avenue, State Street, the Store Street in downtown. But yes, we've been managing those very deliberately to make sure that the fund balances are there, to make sure that we can keep affording to release dollars out to support, to help ameliorate the tax rate, but also to provide dollars that if unexpected things come up, the TIF districts remain solvent.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on this section? Councilor Brown?
Yes, on page 43, I just noticed because I had been looking previously at the different job descriptions under golf, do all of those positions answer to the finance director, or they all, or do some of them answer to Parks and Rec, General Services?
They would all answer to the Director of Operations. Yeah.
Yes, they all answer to the Director of Operations, and then the Director of Operations answers to
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. City Manager.
So that left us to go to the budget resolutions on page 51. So back to the earlier question about how you calculate how much you have to raise, right? So if you, the far right column is titled Fiscal Year 2027 Proposed, and the total general fund appropriation is 93.8 million, or an increase of 6.8 million over fiscal year 26 adopted budget, a 7.8% increase. The war service credits increased by 94,000 to 526,000. This is a result of decisions made by the City Council to increase the amount of veteran credits last year. I anticipate a similar change, so same type of increase next year, based on the information from November when the tax rate is set. Overlay increases by $85,000. We talked about that for fiscal year 27. This amount should be higher based on the upcoming revaluation, anticipated abatement request, but that's as far as I thought it could go based on where we are. So the total use of funds, including war credits and overlay, is $94.6 million. All the other revenues, not including taxes, total $37.6 million. That's an increase of $4.1 million over fiscal year 26. The amount to be raised in taxes is $57 million, an increase of $2.8 million over the fiscal year 26 budget. So the anticipated assessed value is $5.3 billion. I have not allocated any real growth in property assessments for the budget. And while there has been assessed value growth, the changes with utility assessments that are coming and going, the upcoming market value change anticipated, the sale of another property to the state of New Hampshire, the former Lincoln Financial property, will provide for full overall adjustments during the MS1, the tax rate setting in the fall. So we'll see how those shake out. But I could make an assumption that there's tens of millions of value and that you would have more money coming in, but if it doesn't pan out when it comes time for tax rating setting, we got an issue. The estimated city portion of the tax rate is $10.74, a 56-cent or 5.5% increase for over fiscal year 26. As a side note, as I mentioned earlier, 1% tax is equivalent to $569,600. The remaining pages in this section are the resolutions for the operating capital budgets that you'll be considering at the end of the budget process. The next section is the general fund revenue and expense. This starts on page 56. The summary of all the revenue categories totaling $93.8 million. Continuing on page 57.
Mr. City Manager, may I just interrupt you for a second? And I just want to clarify that the resolutions will be adopted, but sometimes they change based on the
Almost
actions.
all the times they change.
I wanted to say that,
Right, so-
because somebody is sitting at home saying, well, this is already a done deal.
No,
But-
this is the starting point. This is,
Right.
right, and
But
then.
Those
you-
resolutions will change depending on what
After
this
you take your
committee does.
votes and do your things, we'll have new resolutions to become part of the permanent record and that.
Thank you.
That all, when you make your changes, you'll be making changes to these resolutions.
I apologize for interrupting
Oh.
you.
Good, catch my breath. Continuing on page 57, under each category are detail items within that category. I'll stick to the describing the notable items. Property taxes first is the single largest revenue item in the budget at $56.1 million. That's an increase of $2.7 million. Under other taxes, payment in lieu of taxes, budget-to-budget increase of $364,000. The big changes here are the additions of the Dartmouth Hitchcock Clinic, Hitchcock property at $155,000. The Kearsarge Old Turnpike Road LLC, that's $99,000. That's the new on the new city solar array that's going on our landfill. The LSC Ursay Minor LLC is $83,000, and it's the new solar array going over on West Portland Street. All other pilots increased marginal amounts to make up the difference. Under the intergov revenue, rooms and meals tax is up $101,000. Based on last year's tax rating, we will see an appropriate amount is shared with the communities. This is at the state share with the communities when tax rates are set in November. Under fines and penalties, the revenue is up $80,000 due to interest payments on delinquent tax accounts and based on the fiscal year 26 to date projections. On page 58, under licenses and permits, construction permits are up $887,000. This is due to the police station, the middle school, and other anticipated projects come along. We look at every project and to try to make a determination about what revenues are coming in. Investment income, this revenue is flat. When I had mentioned this earlier, while there are additional cash flow earnings from short-term interest, with the uncertainty of the Fed fund rate, I'm reluctant to increase this revenue for fiscal year 27. For transfers in from trust is up $647,000. This is a $90,000 trust increase for the opioid reserve for the social worker positions, $245,000 transfer in from recreation reserve for the clubhouse debt service, $500,000 for community improvement reserve for the police station debt service, $380,000 from the other post-employment benefit trust that helped cover the new retiree costs. $5,000 from the recreation reserve for the snow groomer maintenance at Beaver Meadow, $9,000 increase from cemetery and from cemetery trusts. So we are increasing the cemetery trust. There's also transfers in from parking is up $166,000 due to increasing the municipal overhead transfer. Transfer in from golf is up $279,000. This is due to $250,000 transfer for the clubhouse debt service and an increase in municipal overhead charge. The transfer from the tax increment financing districts is up $335,000 due to increased administrative support paid to the general fund and increased public safety support. Other charges in this category are the result of charges and changes in municipal overhead transfers. Regarding the use of fund balance, this revenue is up $300,000. Again, the more of these revenues that come in, the less you have to raise in taxes. $200,000 for the police department debt and $100,000 to help balance the budget. Now, you'll notice that the 2026 revised column shows $3 million in the use of fund balance, and that includes the original budget allocation of $550,000, $105,000 to solve the reduction in the real growth issue before the tax rate setting, $2.1 million that the City Council approved during the fiscal year for the transfer to surplus. Also remember that it's a budgetary item and we don't record an actual revenue in this line. On page 59, trying to throw me off, right? Is that what you did?
I'm testing you,
And the
I'm
motor
testing you.
vehicle registrations, this revenue is up slightly, $125,000 based on the fiscal year '26 trends, and we are balancing the increase in citizens moving to the city, along with the reduction in the number of vehicles being registered. The number of vehicles is not quite tracking with the expectations, and we're cautious on this revenue line. For department service charges, revenue fees are down $40,000. Police special duty services are up $15,000. As staffing levels improve, I anticipate this revenue will continue to increase. Also keep in mind that overtime is offset to this line. Ambulance charges are up $135,000 due to an increase in reimbursement rates for Medicare and Medicaid transports. This revenue line is a moving target, and we will have a better handle with revenue over the course of the fiscal year as we see how the rate changes affect net revenue billing. Alarm box revenue is up $105,000 due to a change in billing practice to bill the building owner instead of the business associated with the building, so it's much more reliant on getting those dollars. And under retiree health reimbursements, this revenue is up $140,000 due to an increase in the number of retirees paying insurance reimbursements, but don't get too excited. When we get to the expense side, you'll see the retiree health costs are up also. Next on page 60, other revenue, the fourth line in the section, cable TV franchise, is down $67,000. This revenue has been decreasing over the year over year. Anticipate this will continue to shrink as more and more people go to streaming services as opposed to cable TV. And when we get to the expenses, I'll note that the city's support for Concord TV, under my recommendation, remains the same, even though this revenue item is shrinking. So that means more of the general fund picks up that cost. Next, on page 61, this chart shows, if you can see that number, those little chart at the top, shows the top 5 revenue producers in the budget, with property taxes number 1, motor vehicles number 2. The remainder of this page and the top of page 62 are a brief discussion on each of these revenues. These items make up 85% of all general fund revenue. And the last section on page 62 shows the fund balance progression over 10 years. Certainly a positive progression with unassigned fund balance at the end of the fiscal year 25 at $15,751,060, or 20.6% of expenses. This is a number the rating agencies will be concerned about if there's a significant reduction, and it could impact the city's bond rating. Any questions on revenues?
Thank you.
Councilor Schlosser.
Thank you. On page 62, we've got the total amount of the fund balances. It'd be nice to have we have a target percent, is that right? That
Yes, you do.
And that's 20-something, 20.5.
20.5.
So it'd be helpful to see how that percent has changed over the years, or even what is it this year, if that might be possible.
20.6.
It's 20.6?
Yep.
And our target is 20.
5.
I see.
You overachieved.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councilor Brown.
Yes, actually, just piggybacking off Councilor Schlosser's question, what is that 0.1%? What does that equal? From the, it's 20.5 is what we want to have, but we're at 20.6. So what is that 0.1? How much is?
I'll get that.
Okay, thank you.
Follow up.
Yes. So based on, you had answered my previous question, it looks, the amount to be raised is $56,957,819. So if we wanted to have no tax increase on the city side, we would need to cut $3,132,690 from that number. Is that correct?
I won't be sitting here doing that.
I'm just saying, is
If
that
you say
correct?
it is,
Well, that's just based on what you said 1% was, and I just multiplied that by 5.5.
Okay.
So, but that is where any cuts to the actual percentage tax increase would come from that number, those categories.
that number would go down. So if you raise less dollars, if your budget goes down, then you need to raise less dollars.
Right, so,
As far as your numbers,
yeah. I just wanted to be clear that, it lists that we need to raise that amount, And in order to raise that amount, we need 5.5%.
Right.
So if we don't want to
Raise that amount,
raise 5.5%, we have to cut
that number, right.
by that number. Okay.
Or you could have additional revenues.
Chair recognizes Mr. LeBrun. Mr. LeBrun, I think, wants to come up. You may not, I may cough at you.
Fortunately, you're sitting far enough away.
Indeed.
The 0.1% is the equivalent of approximately $76,500.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian.
Oh, shoot, I did have one more. What was, oh, yeah.
Councilor Brown?
Yes, we had discussed something, and I'm wondering if those figures that we had discussed previously are included in this budget.
That was very wide.
I can't say it publicly.
I know what
That's
you're.
my question.
Then it isn't a question.
Hang on.
I mean,
all right.
just, you
There'll be
know,
order. Okay, Councilor, you want to explain yourself, or?
I guess, I don't know, I'll have to ask in non-public.
Okay, all right, fine.
Does it,
Does anyone else have a question?
never mind.
Anyone else have a question? Okay. Do you have any other questions, Councilor Brown? All right,
I'm almost done.
Mr. City Manager, move along.
Okay.
Thank you.
The last section of tonight's discussion starts on page 63. Get back to there.
It's just not getting the webpage for some reason.
Okay. It's a general fund summary of expenses, a total of $93.8 million, an increase of $6.8 million. I know I'm saying that again, but I just want to hammer it home, or 7.8% over fiscal year '26. On page 64, compensation and benefits, there are two first categories. The first two categories represent $67.5 million, and that's 72% of the total expenditure of the budget. So just to put that in perspective, and this is up $4.1 million compared to fiscal year '26. So that's a considerable increase. Next category is outside services, and the outside services, this is kind of where you're going to be looking to see when you want to make changes to the budget, where you can go. The next category is outside services, and that's down $206,000 for fiscal year '26. The events for arts grant is not funded. That's $150,000 less. Reduced use of contracted services, so there's higher consultants. In community development is $22,000 less. Funding for Healy Park cleanup is fiscal year '26 was a one-time expense, so that's down $205,000. Communication is down $37,000 due to, remember we had put in a new phone system and we said it would save some money. Here's the money. And then software and hardware maintenance is up $226,000, and this is to increase cost of services and moving, as you've seen, all software costs are going up, and moving the city's ERP program and EnerGov systems to the cloud for ongoing maintenance. This will cut down on the need for servers and maintenance of servers and whatnot. On page 65, utilities are up marginally, since most of our fuel, natural gas, and electricity contracts don't expire until fiscal year 2028, so we locked them in all before the war and all those costs. So while everybody else is going to be scrambling for this, you're okay till 28. Insurances are up $166,000 or 27.4% due to rate increases. So again, that's your property insurance and whatnot. Debt service is up $2.4 million, 27.7% due to a number of large projects included in the January bond sales mentioned earlier in my presentation. $1.2 million of this increase is offset by the use of $500,000 from the Community Improvement Reserve and $200,000 from fund balance as a partial offset for the new police station project, and that's something we talked about when you approved the police station project. And $250,000 in transfer in from the golf fund, $245,000 from the recreation reserve for the clubhouse projects. Again, something we talked about when you approved the clubhouse project. And this is the full amount of the clubhouse debt service, so zero is being borne by the tax rate this year. On page 66, the miscellaneous category is down $21,000, or 1.8%, is mainly due to Zero funding for the request from the Edna McKenna House for fiscal year 2027. So Salvation Army, that's being zeroed out. And I'm increasing the contribution for the Concord Area Transit by $10,000. And the transfer out category is up $262,000 or 7%. It includes increases for the arena of $170,000 because the arena no longer has enough revenues to support its expenses. And solid waste, $145,000 because the solid waste contract is going up, so you need to transfer dollars from general fund, as those of you lucky enough to be on SWAC have seen many times. And a decrease in transfers to capital projects of $52,500. This summary of expenses section provides a good overview of expenditures for all general fund categories combined. The total wages, benefits, debt service, utilities, insurances, and transfers to solid waste is $82.3 million out of $93.8 million. That's 88% of your total budget. So you can see how much really you have left to work with. On page 67 is the last page of this section. It shows each of the categories that we just went over as a percent of the total budget. This is the end of the presentation for tonight. I'm glad to take any questions before you move to the public hearing.
Take questions before I cough again, and I apologize to everyone. Hopefully Monday I'll be fine. Councilor Credevec.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. City Manager, in years past, when the golf course started, was on a trend of losing money, and we made a very conscious effort to turn around the operation so that it could be more profitable for our special revenue fund. Are we going to set ourselves on the same path with the arena, that we need to look at a way to restructure the revenues that are coming in so that it is not a burden on the taxpayers as it is a special revenue fund?
Not being an expert in an arena operations, I would say once this comes onto the general fund, it'll be on the general fund going forward, because with one sheet of ice, we are top of the market in terms of what we charge. We have pretty much maximized the use of the arena during non-ice hours. I really don't see a situation, unless you were to make other major capital improvements to that arena, that you're going to be able to generate the revenues necessary to offset the expenses. So this is I think, a watershed moment for the arena. You got major capital expense coming up, and you've done this in the past when you did the locker room before. That was all on the general fund. This is 30 years ago or so. And you said, you know what, the general fund, the general taxpayers are going to make these major improvements, and it's going to benefit the entire community. You did that. When they got paid off, it got paid off. They no longer had to support it. But I think same thing with this building, and the same thing with the general operating costs, is a watershed moment in terms of, do you want to be in the arena business? If you want to be in the arena business, then you approve these projects. If you don't want to be in the arena business, then you talk about how to unwind out of the arena business. As you can see, I'm recommending staying in the arena business. I think it's a very important amenity for the community. It's one of the things that make Concord special, but you are the policymakers.
Thank you. I appreciate the honesty.
Councilor Kurtz.
Thank you. Related to the arena, I had made a note in the first part of your presentation, and I just would love to clarify. I thought that I heard you say that some of the arena was funded with LCWF grants, Land Conservation Waterfront grants, and I'm curious about that and what that means in terms of the city's obligation to maintain the arena as an arena or similar entity.
There is when I say the money, that was really like one-time dollars. There have been a couple times, because remember we just received. Hopefully, we're going to receive $500,000 if we can match it for the skate park out there, right? So, but when you accept those dollars, you accept the requirements that come along with those dollars for public use. So that it's also true for White Park. It's true for Memorial Field. There's a lot of stipulations that go with that, which you accept when you accept those dollars. But it's not an annual dollars coming in, one-time dollars. So if you were to stop using it as an arena, there would have to be a discussion with the state and with Washington and say, you know what, we accepted these dollars, we accepted the commitment to keep this in operation, we need to do something else. And we've done that in the past. So for example, you had LWCF requirements on over by the Boys and Girls Club off of Bradley Street. and they want to do an expansion. So we had to negotiate with them to dedicate other property to be set aside for forever in protection, open to the public, so that the Boys and Girls Club could make those improvements to their facility. And it worked out fabulous because we're hand in glove over there. But it's something, a process you have to go through. You can imagine working with Washington is another whole experience. We have experience doing it, we've done it successfully, but there's a lot of, and almost every park in the city is in the same situation.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Keach?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Manager, you talked about increased insurance costs in the tune of $150,000 or something in that range. I'm just curious, are we locked into any contracts that would get us into trouble in the way the school district did, where they could come back and retroactively charge us increased premiums? Or are we paying what we're paying and that's the end of the deal?
We're paying what we're paying, and that's the end of the deal. Now, so, and we do aggressively look at, when we look at these, and Brian, if I run astray here, feel free to come on. We aggressively look at where our insurance is, and there's I don't have to be honest with you, I think you all recognize this. A lot of people don't want to insure governments because there's a lot of liability out there, and particularly when it comes to things like ice skating rinks and dams, and and how many, yes, right. So when we do get those prices, they are high, but we do get the best price we can for all of these things. I think property and liability was up how much this year total?
Approximately $250,000 between the two of them.
And a lot of that has to do with a lot of stuff that goes on across the way at the state about how much they have to have in their reserves for, for going forward. So it's somewhat similar, but we can get out of those things. We're not going to get a bill later on that says, hey, we just had a big problem, you have to kick in $150,000. We don't do business that way.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Schlosser?
And what was the thinking about reducing the McKenna House funding this year, zeroing that out? What was that thinking?
They said, we don't need the money.
Thank you.
So I said, thank you very much, and I didn't put the money in, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, yeah. Councilor Brown?
Yes. Is it true that all LWCF funds, they just have to remain in perpetuity public recreation? It doesn't matter what, like it doesn't have to stay a skate house or a skate park like Russell Martin Park, right? That was a swap with the school district, and that's LWCF, so that can change into like a bike park as long as it's public recreation.
You can negotiate, but you have to negotiate,
let them know.
exactly, yeah.
Okay.
You have to, well, not only just let them know, get their approval,
Okay.
and then it goes from the state to the feds back.
Okay. Follow up.
Follow up.
Can we do the same kind of data analysis for the Everett Arena that was done for the golf course? Like you said, this is a watershed moment.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of analysis did we do at that point?
You would have to.
How do we do that? Do we do that internally?
I think you'd want to bring in a consultant
Okay.
and bring in somebody who knows how to operate arenas
Okay.
and look at the business model and how many who's our competitors, how much it would cost, what the recommendations would be. Just from what I've seen, again, not an expert, I don't see with one sheet of ice how you can compete with others and then attract enough action, so to speak, enough activity to generate enough dollars to have that going. But, maybe there's other uses you can get on that overall property, but then you'd have to be willing to charge costs for that. So I can't see you charging money for people to use the skateboard park. Maybe you could, but can you generate hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to help offset the other costs? Probably not with the skateboard park, maybe with something else.
Councilor Davey?
To the question you just answered about the arena, is that you're saying you can't guarantee the utilization? Is that just wintertime or is that winter and summer?
Everything.
Everything?
I think we're maximized.
Councilor Credit?
Okay.
Thank you. Just for historic purposes, probably the best $7,000 we ever spent was the agronomist report for Beaver Meadow Golf Course, where we actually brought in the PGA, and they told us what we needed, and they put us down the path where we are today.
Yeah, you don't have to go. You don't have to go all in.
No.
You could do this in portions and see really is before we go to a full phased improvements is something, a preliminary analysis you could do for something like that, yeah.
Other questions? At the end, I'm sorry, so Todd,
If
go
I
ahead.
may, Your Honor, I just have one other question. Just, with the projects before us for the arena for this fiscal year, I noted that we had a situation with the library, with the HVAC system. We were able to actually locate a used piece of equipment that will be installed now. And that has, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, 7 years of life. 5 to 7. Something like that. Is there any opportunity to perhaps do something similar to that here, or are these compressors a little bit more challenging in terms of finding a used piece of equipment?
We've done that. We've been down that road, and compressors made in 49 and 50. It's hard to go on Etsy and find, or eBay and find those pieces anymore. And that's what we've been doing. That's how we've got to where we are today, and now the end is nigh. So.
Follow-up?
By the way, you remind me of an incident when I was, like my first summer out of high school, and I was the office manager for a fly-by-night aluminum siding company. And the owner kept sending the mechanic to the junkyard to get pieces for the truck that kept breaking down. And one day the guy said, Brian, he said, you take a piece of junk, which is the truck, you put junk into it. You put junk into junk, and what you got? Junk.
Yeah, if I may, what I was actually asking was, we had I don't want to put junk into junk either. I think it's not a good policy, but we had luck with the library with HVAC finding a used system out there that we could find. That's not going to be something that we could do for these compressors, right?
No, we've done it for. So if you look at the arena, those boards came from. I'm trying to remember what. So we found a very wealthy user who needs to have new boards all the time. So they said, hey, if you come up and get them and take them and haul them out of there, you can replace the board. And we were able to do that with board. I think we did the same thing. With the glass. So that whole thing is piece upon piece trying to keep the costs down, and they've done a fabulous job doing that. But we're just at the end for the compressor, and we're concerned about, as I mentioned, the system we want to go to. We're concerned about as these things, they break down, there's deterioration, and then if it's a glycol system leaking, that's one thing. If it's ammonia system leaking underneath this, now we got children in there and all kinds of other issues, and staff in there. That's why I think we've been very fortunate to get as far as we have.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No. Councilor Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would you, if you don't want to answer this, I'm happy to, so just know that given that your presentation in particular will be paid attention to by our constituents, knowing how tough things are for everybody, governments included, do you feel Concord is taking a bit of a hit from the downshifting of cost from the feds and the state? And if you said it at the beginning, I do apologize that I was late, ironically coming from the State House. But do you get a sense, as I believe is the case, that the downshifting of costs has really created some difficulties for us that we haven't faced in the past?
It has, and I think what it also has done is it's accumulated over the years. So the flexibility that you would have in the past. So I'll just, from memory, you used to receive $1.2 million in revenue sharing.
Right.
Well, back then, that $1.2 million was worth about 4% on the tax rate. So if you had that equivalent now, you could snap your fingers and 4% off that tax rate would go away immediately. The highway block grant would go up on a regular basis to reflect increases in cost. As you can see, it's not going anywhere.
Right.
So there's all kinds of things like that. The state buying property in the city,
Right.
which, okay, they got the money to do that, but that takes it off the tax rolls. So the answer to your question is yes. I don't have any problem saying yes, but I think it's true of almost all the communities. They're all dealing with the same thing. Then you combine it with what goes on in the school district. I go back to my favorite thing of which you're sick of hearing me say. When COVID came along and they gave us $4.5 million and they gave the county $27 million and they gave Manchester $44 million and they gave Portsmouth $16 million. What was that about?
Right.
I mean, where's the justice in that? I mean, it just, so, there you go. So, and of course, we used our dollars to keep the tax. I'm putting it the wrong way, Brian, because Brian's the one who has to report on this. But you did not go out and hire additional staff. You didn't go out and spend it on any crazy projects, one-time thing. You actually made sure you kept used it as a revenue and kept our costs down to the taxpayers. A lot of other communities went out, and the schools got a whole lot of money too. And they went out and hired staff and created all kinds of positions. And guess what now? All those positions have to be eliminated and are all gone.
Right. Yeah, I just want to add to that, and I thought your answer was great. I mean, and there are a number of other pieces that are hard to explain but are true. Like, there was a unfunded liability that used to be a shared cost with the state on our retirement system for all public workers at the local and county levels. We were supposed to have gotten that back. Still hasn't happened yet. Something that a lot of us still have on our to-do list. And it has caused a huge problem for cities like Concord.
It's millions upon millions.
Right.
Yeah,
And some of the downshifting of the costs are worse on school districts, in particular things like the voucher program, the education, I forget what EFA stands for, forgive me, the voucher program, thank you, that is paying $4,000 a kid to go to private schools. That obviously doesn't have a direct impact on the city, but overall, when more and more decisions are being made like that, that take money out of public coffers and use it for these private reasons, I feel like that should be, there's a longer speech I could give on that, and maybe we should write an op-ed, a couple of us, to talk about why things are as difficult as they are. Medicaid downshifting of costs to the states, the rise in insurance, private insurance, because of those downshifting of costs. I mean, if you want to get political, that one of the greatest things we could do for the local costs would be to have Medicare for all. It would really dramatically lower your property taxes, but that's as political as I'm going to get. But there are just a number of things that I think that in a bipartisan way you can look at all of the ways these pieces of governments interact, that if it's sort of a perfect storm of crap, if I may be so bold, that it makes it really hard for us, that I really am more saying this, not just, I get you get that, but for our constituents that are here or at home, that I hope that we can continue that conversation offline through social media and whatnot, because it's really complicated and difficult, but I appreciate
Something
that.
as basic as an unclaimed body for burial. The state used to cover
Right.
that cost. Now it's on the community.
Interesting.
So, I mean, that's the level that we've got to.
Yeah, multiple layers of things like that. Thank you so much for that conversation. I appreciate it.
Any other questions for the city manager before I open up for, that's the end of your presentation, correct?
Yes, sir.
Let me just say one thing. First, thank you for a thorough and clear overview of the budget. I saw a graphic on Councilor Horn's social media this afternoon that compared the dollar value of the proposed tax rate by the city and the tax rate increases adopted by the two school districts. And I don't want to throw the school districts onto the bus because they've been facing incredible pressures, similar to what Councilor Schultz was talking about. But it was eye-opening to me. I hadn't really seen it presented that way, but the graphic showed that the Concord School District tax increase is $1.80 per thousand. The Merrimack Valley School District tax increase is equivalent to $3.28 per thousand, and your proposed tax increase is 56 cents per thousand. And I only mentioned that for scale. I think you've done a great job of putting together a responsible budget. I think it is too, the tax rate increase certainly is too high in my eyes.
I agree.
Yeah, and so I think we have work to do, but, in many ways, I think we receive pressure, at our end because of what's happening in other places. We certainly will respond to the taxpayers. We certainly will respond to what we hear from our constituents. But I think that you've done a great job putting us in a preliminary place from which to work, so thank you.
I think together, you'll figure it out.
I
And
know
I'll work
that.
with you to figure it out.
Thank you. Now, is there anyone in the audience who would like to make comments or testify, or? Yes, please come on up. Welcome. No, it makes no difference, just wherever you're comfortable. Please just identify yourself, so.
Chrissy Ferrara, good resident. I don't know really what to say. This tax increase is frightening. And you talk about sustainability, but if you're constantly looking to the citizens of Concord to continually pay property taxes over and over and over again every year, how is that sustainable? How is that your default? Why is that the default? Let's look at other ways that we can make revenue happen. You're saying that times have changed, that different things that you were able to do before increase certain budget lines by 4% here, 3% there. That's obviously not the case now. So we need new eyes on budgets to figure out what else that can be done, because property owners, if my property taxes just went up $900 last year, that means they're going to go up again. If you say my house is worth $800,000 now, doesn't mean that's what I get for it. Doesn't mean that's what I came anywhere near paying for it, but that's might be what I all of a sudden have to pay for insurance now, because that's what they say will cost to rebuild my house if it burns in a fire, $1,100,000 for a house I paid $300,000 for over 10 years ago. Make that make sense. How am I supposed to be able to continue paying for a house that really isn't worth that much? We know that this inflation, this housing inflation bubble, is coming from a large variety of factors around the country. Doesn't make it true. So how do you make that, how do you get that money from me? Where is it going to come from? We haven't had increases in salaries for how many years? I don't know, everything that goes up in a house, I'm paying 3 times as what I was paying 10 years ago for my water and my electricity. So how am I supposed to pay the same in taxes? And I don't really have an eloquent speech to share here tonight, just the fact that I'm scared I'll have to leave, because I don't know if I can afford to stay in the state anymore. Maybe I'll take my money, sell my house, and go to New York, because Mamdani's taxing the millionaires and multimillionaires and billionaires in the state. Why don't we do that here? People who actually have the money to pay, let's charge them that money. Let's get the taxes from them, because somebody who's making $65,000 a year can't pay more in taxes. I don't know what else to say.
I think you've been very eloquent. We appreciate your comments. Any questions for Ms. Farrar? Yes.
Couldn't agree with you more on the taxing the millionaires and billionaires. That's a difficult one for us to do as a council, unfortunately. We don't have that right. Couldn't agree more. I just wanted to know 2 things. Which neighborhood do you live in, if you don't mind me asking?
Ward 4.
Ward 4, thank you. And do you have any specific areas in the budget of what you've heard? And if you don't know right now, at any point over our presentations, if it comes to you, any areas that you think we could cut or you would recommend that we cut, I think we'd all really love to hear your suggestions.
I have to say it was really interesting listening to everything tonight. I learned a lot. I'll be coming more to learn more and get a better understanding of how these decisions are made. I don't have any suggestions at the moment, but I think there needs to be new ways of looking at things on how to get that revenue. And I'm going to keep thinking about it, because honestly, the increase I just learned about a few days ago from social media. Thank you very much. And I just felt like I needed to be here and to understand a little bit more about the process and see what, all of the different line items that are happening and the thought that goes into everything. And I know it's not easy. But something has to give with the residents and the residents who own causes here. It really, we can't just keep relying on them to say, you know, you're going to pay these taxes. What about renters to pay taxes or other larger businesses that are paying taxes? I don't know what the answer is, but we got to diversify the revenue and not just on property owners.
Yeah, as Councilor Schultz mentioned, you know, the legislature tells us what we can collect money on. And that's how we're constrained. I mean, I'd love to have some other tax option. And as the city manager said, the revenue sharing that they originally, when the rooms and meals tax was adopted, I think they were supposed to share 40% of the revenue with the cities and towns. And I don't think they ever met that bar. And we're still waiting to get the rest, you know, to get the full compensation. And now I think 2 years ago, Governor Sununu signed a budget that reduced the municipal share to 30% or something like that.
Sounds about right.
You know, but we still haven't gotten even 30%. If I may ask you, is your primary source of news social media?
No, not necessarily.
You
but,
subscribe to a newspaper or news service? Or?
I do.
Okay, all right, just curious. Great, okay. Any other questions for Ms. Ferrara? Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening.
Appreciate it.
Have a good night.
You too. Would anyone else like to testify? All right, hearing none. Excuse me. I'll remind the councilors that we meet again in these chambers as the Finance Committee next Monday at 5:30. And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, second?
Moved, seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. We're adjourned.